Have you ever watched someone with a seemingly endless capacity for compassion, a person who senses the slightest shift in energy, who anticipates the needs of others almost before they're spoken, collide with a narcissist who thrives on manipulation and control? It's a paradox. How can the kindest, most empathetic soul possibly destroy someone who appears so domineering? That question drives the theme of this video. Only a super empath can destroy a narcissist. Many of us assume empathic means overly sensitive or easily victimized. But what if, in that sensitivity, there's a hidden strength? Imagine Hannah, a gentle teacher always going the extra mile for students and coworkers. Her warmth and deep emotional intelligence attracted Evan, a narcissist disguised under charm and grand promises. Initially, Hannah's empathy made her the perfect target. She forgave Evan's mood swings, rationalized his growing criticisms, and tried to heal his insecurities. She believed unwavering kindness was the path to bridging any gap. Yet over time, she noticed a draining pattern. Each time she responded to insults with compassion, he pressed further. Each time she forgave, he escalated demands. Each time she tried to rationalize his gaslighting, she felt more anxious and disconnected from herself. Until, quietly, something inside her shifted. She didn't turn cruel, she simply saw through Evan's illusions. And in that moment, the entire dynamic toppled, leaving him powerless. If you've ever witnessed or experienced a similarly puzzling scenario, where the most empathetic person ends up being the one who breaks the narcissist, type "seen it" in the comments. Because it's not about aggressiveness or vengeance. It's about a unique clarity and integrity that only a super empath can muster once they awaken to the truth. In this video, we'll uncover why the super empath's depth of perception and emotional strength ultimately dismantle the narcissist's illusions. With examples, including rumored celebrity parallels, and references to Jordan Peterson's insights on power dynamics, we'll explore how empathy, ironically, becomes the greatest threat to narcissistic manipulation. Let's define super empath. In popular culture, an empath is someone deeply attuned to others' emotions, almost to the point of sharing their feelings. A super empath, however, goes further. They don't just pick up on surface feelings, they sense the unspoken motivations, the hidden insecurities, and underlying currents in any interaction. It's as though they have an internal radar that scans beyond the facade. Contrary to the stereotype of someone delicate or fragile, super empaths often have powerful emotional intelligence. They can simultaneously grasp multiple emotional layers, sometimes at the cost of personal comfort. Because they tend to prioritize harmony, they often suppress their own needs to accommodate others. A narcissist, spotting an endless well of compassion, sees a prime supply who will tolerate or excuse bad behavior. Yet in Jordan Peterson's perspective on power and responsibility, such empathic individuals hold a hidden advantage. They're anchored in reality. They feel deeply, yes, but they can also perceive patterns. Once they sense repeated contradictions, say, the narcissist's sweet words but cruel actions, they start to question. Because they can't abide emotional dishonesty, eventually they piece together the narcissist's manipulative puzzle. In daily life, you might see this dynamic, a super empath volunteering too much at work or in a social group, the narcissist exploiting them with endless favors, sly put-downs, or guilt trips. Initially, the empath wants to keep peace. But at a certain point, they spot the mismatch between the narcissist's performative charm and their underlying intent to control. This recognition is the foundation for the empath's transformation. If you resonate with the idea that being an empath is more than feeling too much, but includes a keen sense of emotional authenticity, type "deep insight" in the comments. Because the super empath label is not about passivity, it's about insight so profound that once turned toward the narcissist's false reality, it can dismantle the entire structure of manipulation. Now, why would a narcissist, who thrives on dominance, specifically target a super empath, someone with seemingly strong intuition? The answer lies in the super empath's initial openness and willingness to see the best in others. Narcissists sense that if they can charm the empath early on, the empath's natural inclination to give endless chances will kick in, enabling them to stretch boundaries without immediate consequence. Furthermore, narcissists often depend on emotional supply, attention, validation, admiration, or compliance. A super empath has a generous reservoir of emotional support. They can empathize with the narcissist's wounds or sob stories, giving them a consistent stream of reassurance. Narcissists find it irresistible because they can push the empath, exploit their compassion, and still see them return with more patience or forgiveness. But ironically, the same depth that makes the empath an ideal supply eventually becomes the narcissist's downfall. Because once the empath's compassion is overshadowed by clarity, they see the manipulations, the cyclical abuse, that unwavering empathy flips into a different stance. The empath won't necessarily become cruel, but they'll adopt boundaries that a narcissist can't handle. They'll set lines that say, "I won't excuse you belittling me," or "I'm not going to argue about your twisted version of events." They starve the narcissist of the usual emotional reaction. Without that reaction, the narcissist's game falters. Take rumored celebrity tales. A famous empathic actor or singer passionately supports their demanding partner at first, fueling the partner's sense of control. Eventually, the star notices repeated gaslighting or exploitation, awakens, and quietly but decisively separates, leaving the narcissist reeling. This transformation from unconditional emotional caretaker to boundary setter typically stuns the narcissist, who counted on never being cut off. If you've seen someone with a big heart eventually turn resolute and leave a manipulator speechless, comment "big heart, strong boundaries" below. That evolution from open caretaker to self-possessed individual is the essence of the super empath's power. Let's illustrate this with Hannah's early journey with Evan. She's the super empath, sensing people's hurts and always stepping in to soothe. Evan, the narcissist, identifies her as a prime candidate, someone he can manipulate under the guise of connection. At first, Evan mirrors Hannah's kindness, praising her sensitivity, praising how she just gets him. She sees a misunderstood soul needing love. She invests more compassion, more time, ignoring early red flags like subtle put-downs or slight manipulations. "I'm just joking, can't you take a joke?" This stage is often called love bombing or idealization. The narcissist draws the empath deeper. Hannah overlooks the occasional offhand cruelty because she believes genuine love means forgiving flaws. She rationalizes that Evan's mood swings are from childhood trauma, and her empathy can help him heal. This vulnerability is how the narcissist cements control. Yet behind the facade, Evan tests Hannah's tolerance, small criticisms about her style, guilt trips if she's busy, or jokes about her friends. Each time Hannah responds gently, giving him the benefit of the doubt. In her mind, she's bridging empathy, but from his perspective, he's confirming that she won't fight back. If you've seen a friend ignore tiny warning signs because they wanted to believe in someone's potential, type "ignored the signs" in the comments. It's not stupidity, it's the empathic drive to see the wounded child in the abuser. But eventually, the empath's deeper intuition surfaces, and that's where the narrative shifts. In a typical empath-narcissist bond, something eventually cracks. The empath's illusions about who the narcissist is start to shatter. It's rarely an explosive confrontation at first. More commonly, it's a slow accumulation of contradictions that the empath's mind can no longer rationalize away. They notice repeating patterns, manipulative arguments, consistent blame, or repeated boundary violations. Their altruistic instincts begin to collide with an undeniable sense of wrongness. For Hannah, perhaps it's the day she overhears Evan casually mocking her compassion to a mutual friend, bragging how easy it is to get her to do what he wants. Or maybe she spots blatant lies about a conversation they had, gaslighting so bold it jolts her from confusion to certainty. The empath's heartbreak can be intense, but their emotional intelligence also means they know their feelings are pointing to a fundamental betrayal of trust. Here, they pivot from, "if I just love them harder, they'll change," to "something is deeply off, and I can't keep sacrificing myself." This isn't an overnight shift, it's a mental reframe that might come with tears, guilt, or fear of losing the relationship. But empathy no longer blinds them to the narcissist's exploitation. They see that, helping the narcissist is fueling the abuse cycle. Jordan Peterson often talks about the necessity of recognizing hierarchical or dominance-driven relationships, noting that sometimes kindness is interpreted as weakness in a power-based dynamic. The empath's aha moment aligns with Peterson's perspective: you can't negotiate with a manipulator using empathy alone, you must adopt self-protective strategies. If you've experienced that moment of painfully admitting, "My kindness is being used against me," comment, "I realized it," below. Because acknowledging that fundamental shift paves the way for the empath's empowerment, and the narcissist's unraveling. Destroy might sound extreme. Yet the video's core claim is that the super empath truly can undo a narcissist's power. Not by aggression or revenge, but by withdrawing from the manipulative dance. Here's how. Seeing beyond the mask. A super empath's deep emotional insight eventually cuts through the narcissist's illusions. They identify gaslighting, double standards, and emotional blackmail for what they are. In that recognition, the narcissist's carefully crafted persona, of being special, misunderstood, or always right, loses credibility. Refusing emotional supply. Narcissists feed off reactions. The empath's meltdown, pleas, tears, or endless sweet reassurance all fuel the narcissist's sense of control. But once the empath decides, "I will no longer engage on those terms," the narcissist starves. They can't provoke panic or guilt. They can't guilt trip if the empath no longer internalizes it. Enforcing boundaries without apology. When the empath quietly but firmly says, "Don't speak to me like that," or "I'm leaving this conversation," and follows through each time, the narcissist can't continue the cycle of escalation and manipulation. Boundaries are enforced not with rage but with calm conviction. The narcissist finds themselves powerless: no arguments, no tears, just a wall they can't breach. Emotional detachment. The empath's biggest advantage is their ability to sense truth. Once they see the narcissist's pattern, they stop personalizing the attacks, and realize, this isn't about me, it's about their inability to empathize. That detachment ensures the narcissist can no longer shape the empath's self-image. Jordan Peterson often stresses that knowing your own worth and identity prevents external forces from controlling you. The super empath exemplifies this: they remain compassionate but no longer let the narcissist define who they are. Quiet exit or boundary. Ultimately, the empath may leave the relationship or drastically limit contact. The narcissist, left without the empath's light to manipulate, experiences a form of collapse. They lose the supply that validated their illusions. That's the destruction. The narcissist is forced to confront their emptiness or scramble for a new victim. Hence, the super empath destroys the narcissist's illusions by simply removing the environment, emotional compliance, confusion, second-guessing, that sustain the narcissist's tactics. If you see how destroy is less about aggression and more about dismantling illusions, type "end the illusion" in the comments. Let's consider a rumored scenario from the entertainment world. A prominent actress, celebrated for her humanitarian work, clearly empathic traits, compassion, activism, emotional sensitivity, married a successful but notoriously self-centered director. At first, he was all flattery and charm. She was enthralled by his creative genius, and he admired her giving spirit. Insiders said she constantly covered for his bad moods on set, apologized to staff he insulted, and tried to keep the peace. Over time, he escalated controlling moves, deciding her roles, belittling her philanthropic efforts, calling them pointless crusades. She tried to reason sweetly, to show him the value in her work. He scoffed, turning every conversation into an ego-stroking session for himself. At some point, unnamed sources claim, she discovered he'd consistently manipulated their finances and twisted stories about her behind her back. Heartbroken, she quietly but firmly parted ways, refusing to engage in public drama. Soon enough, he was left flailing, launching smear campaigns. But it fell flat because she never retaliated in the spotlight. She simply refused contact and lived her truth. The director's meltdown was widely rumored, as he lost the persona of creative genius with a doting, philanthropic spouse that propped up his image. Whether or not the tabloids exaggerated, it demonstrates how the empath's refusal to keep feeding an abuser's illusions can lead to the narcissist's downfall, at least psychologically. If you recognize parallels, where the empath's "no more" ended the abuser's reign, comment "no more reign." Because the takeaway is universal, once a super empath steps out of the manipulative dynamic, the narcissist's entire show starts unraveling. A key aspect is the internal transformation of the super empath. It's not just setting boundaries outwardly, it's also about healing the emotional triggers that made them overly accommodating. Empaths typically have high compassion, which is admirable but can mutate into self-neglect if they keep overlooking their own needs to salvage a toxic relationship. Steps in the empath's internal awakening. Confronting self-doubt. Empaths often blame themselves when the narcissist rages or manipulates. The first awakening step is recognizing, this chaos isn't my fault. Their behavior arises from their inability to empathize, not my failure to love enough. That realization lifts a huge weight of guilt. Processing pain. Realizing you've been exploited hurts. The empath might grieve the ideal relationship they hoped for. This stage can bring tears, confusion, or an identity crisis. I'm supposed to help people, so how did I end up enabling abuse? But facing those emotions paves the path to clarity. Reclaiming self-worth. They reaffirm their values. Empathy is still a virtue, but not at the expense of one's soul. They learn that not everyone deserves unlimited compassion, especially those who twist it into a tool for control. Jordan Peterson often emphasizes personal responsibility in shaping your environment. Here, the empath takes responsibility for their emotional boundaries, not for the narcissist's wounds. Setting boundaries with confidence. Post-awakening, the empath states, "No," or "that won't work for me," without trembling. They endure the narcissist's attempts to guilt or provoke. They do not revert to old patterns of appeasing. Each boundary enforced is a step to fully extricate from the manipulative cycle. Ultimate detachment. Whether or not they physically leave the narcissist, they emotionally detach from the illusions. They refuse to engage in meaningless arguments or destructive patterns. The narcissist, losing emotional supply, often crumbles. For the empath, this closure is internal. They may not get an apology or neat ending, but they find peace in their self-restored authenticity. If you're walking that inner path, moving from confusion to clarity, type self-heal journey. Because the super empath's real power arises from healing within, then calmly stepping away from the narcissist's control. That is how they effectively destroy the narcissist's manipulative hold. We've seen how the super empath, once awakened to a narcissist's manipulations, can quietly but definitively topple the narcissist's power. The empath's deep emotional intelligence, initially used against them, becomes the lens through which they see the narcissist's illusions. When they realize no amount of kindness will truly fix someone who exploits empathy, they shift gears, dropping naive hopes and adopting firm boundaries. But let's recap the core takeaways. Why only a super empath? A typical empath might remain stuck in confusion, questioning their own worth. A super empath, by contrast, eventually sees the pattern clearly enough to stop the cycle. They transform their gift of empathy into discernment. Empathy no longer means self-sacrifice without limits, it means accurate reading of emotional truth and responding with self-respect. What destroying really means. Destroy doesn't refer to violence or vengeance. It refers to stripping away the narcissist's ability to manipulate. Once the super empath ceases to yield emotional compliance, the narcissist's sense of control collapses, and they face their own emptiness. This is more devastating than any shouting match, it's the removal of their supply. How the shift happens. The empath experiences a gradual buildup of inconsistencies, culminating in a stark moment of clarity. They realize they can't love a narcissist into changing. They also discover their empathy is wasted if it perpetuates abuse. So they calmly enforce boundaries or exit, guided by new self-awareness. Jordan Peterson's Echo. Peterson often highlights personal responsibility in hierarchical power dynamics, suggesting sometimes you have to stand up and say, no. The super empath does exactly that, but from an emotionally grounded place. They do not hate or punish, they simply cease being a participant in the narcissist's illusions. Inspiring examples. From rumored celebrity stories to personal acquaintances, we see the same pattern: empath invests love, narcissist abuses it, empath awakens, empath withdraws or sets unshakable boundaries, narcissist is left floundering. If you're feeling that stirring recognition, maybe you see your own empathic traits and realize how they've been exploited. Type Super Empath Rising in the comments. You don't have to lose your caring nature to stand strong. Recognize the power in your empathy. You can remain empathetic yet refuse to be an emotional doormat. Final encouragement. Being a super empath isn't about overshadowing the narcissist with aggression. It's about clarity. You dismantle a narcissist's power by no longer fueling their illusions with your unconditional compliance or emotional reaction. Compassion, yes, but compassion with boundaries. If you suspect you're in a damaging empath, narcissist loop, remember, it's not your responsibility to fix them. It is your responsibility to protect your own emotional health. Thank you for watching. Now that you understand why only a super empath can destroy a narcissist, consider how you might apply these insights in your life. If you need to stand up more firmly, do so. If you need to walk away, let that be your closure. And don't forget, your empathy is a powerful gift, but only when directed with wisdom and balanced by self-respect.